The auction block. The sun beat down on Dustwood like a punishment. Heat shimmered off the cracked earth, and the wooden buildings of the frontier town leaned like tired old men. A small crowd had gathered near the steps of the sheriff's office, where a makeshift auction platform stood, just 4 planks nailed together in haste. The people weren't there for livestock. They were there for a woman. Evelyn Hart stood barefoot on the platform, holding her daughter's hand. Sweat dripped down her neck, and her swollen belly pressed against the thin, faded dress that used to fit her before the world turned on its head. 7 months pregnant, 26, and widowed, she no longer had land, money, or protection. All that remained was Sadie, her 6-year-old, clutching her arm like a lifeline, and the debt her husband had left behind. Sheriff Duggan cleared his throat and raised his hat. By order of the town council, and by way of repayment for the outstanding debts of the late Thomas Hart, the widow and her child are hereby auctioned for lawful guardianship and labor. Terms final. Evelyn looked down, trying not to cry. She wouldn't beg. Not here. Not like this. The first bid came from a rancher with yellow teeth and a grin that made his stomach twist. I'll take the both for $30 and board. I need someone to keep the kitchen hot and the bed warm. A ripple of laughter broke through the crowd. Evelyn's fingers tightened around Sadie's. 40, another man called. I've got a spare room in the barn and no wife to scold me. Her heart thumped. Not one face in the crowd showed kindness. Just hunger, curiosity, amusement, like she was something on display. Then the sound of hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, cut through the heat. A black horse trotted into view, its rider tall, lean, and dressed in all black. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but his presence silenced the crowd. He dismounted without a word, boots thudding on the dirt, and stepped toward the platform. Sheriff Duggan blinked. Mr. Thorne, I wasn't aware you were in town. I wasn't, the man said, voice quiet but edged like a knife. Until I heard a woman and child were being sold like mules. A murmur ran through the onlookers. Caleb Thorne. The name carried weight in these parts. Some called him an outlaw turned rancher. Others whispered of darker things. A man who'd once killed 2 brothers in a poker game and never looked back. But everyone knew one thing. He was rich, alone, and answered to no one. The sheriff cleared his throat. Well, the law allows. $80, Caleb said. Gasps. That was nearly triple the previous bid. Eyes shifted between him and Evelyn, wondering what interest a man like him could have in a woman like her. Final offer, he added. Sheriff Duggan looked around. No one else spoke. The moment stretched, then snapped. Sold, the sheriff said, more relieved than anything. To Mr. Thorne. Evelyn didn't move. Her legs felt like stone. She didn't know what scared her more, being sold to a stranger or the look in his eyes when he offered the bid. Not lust, not cruelty, something colder. Calculated. Caleb reached up a gloved hand. You'll ride with me. Sadie looked up at her mother, unsure. Evelyn gathered her daughter into her arms and let the man help her down from the platform. His hand was rough, calloused, but steady. When her feet touched the ground, he offered her the saddle. I don't bite, he said, almost dryly. They rode out of town in silence. Dust rose behind them like smoke. The townsfolk stood watching long after they were gone, whispers twisting like wind through the saloon doors and general store porches. No one knew what Caleb Thorne wanted with a pregnant widow and her child. And neither did Evelyn Hart. But as the town faded behind her, she looked back just once. She wasn't free. Not really. But the man who'd bought her hadn't looked at her the way the others had. There'd be no hunger in his eyes. Only shadows. The secrets buried under dust. The trail from Dustwood to Thorn Hollow stretched across 20 miles of dry, stubborn land. Evelyn rode in silence behind Caleb, her arms wrapped tightly around Sadie, who had long since fallen asleep against her chest. The rhythmic clop of hooves, the creak of the saddle, and the distant call of hawks were all that filled the emptiness between them. Caleb hadn't spoken a word since they left town. He led with the confidence of someone who didn't need to explain himself. His back was straight, his silhouette sharp against the setting sun. Evelyn studied him from behind, searching for any clue to his intentions. Something softer, something dangerous. but found only unreadable stillness. They arrived just as dusk painted the land gold. Thorn Hollow, Caleb's ranch, wasn't the sprawling empire she'd imagined. It was quiet, almost humble. A two-story cabin stood at the center of a fenced clearing, flanked by a weathered barn and a well. Chickens scattered as they rode in. An older woman stepped onto the porch, her silver hair pinned tight, her eyes sharp as barbed wire. "Martha," Caleb said, finally breaking the silence. "We've got guests." Martha didn't flinch. She gave Evelyn one sweeping look, belly, child, shoes worn to threads, and nodded once. Rooms made up. Supper's still warm. That was it. No questions. No judgments. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and hearth smoke. Caleb motioned toward a door off the main room. "You and the girls sleep in there. You'll find clean linens. I'll speak with you in the morning." Evelyn hesitated. "Why? Why did you buy me?" His eyes flicked to hers, calm but unreadable. "Because you needed buying." Then he turned and walked away. The guest room was small but clean. Wooden walls, a soft bed, a basin of fresh water. Evelyn bathed Sadie, laid her down, and watched her sleep. Then she sat in the dark, one hand on her belly, the other gripping her wedding ring. She hadn't worn it in 2 days. Thomas Hart had died 3 weeks ago in a bar fight, drunk, angry, and reckless to the end. She hadn't cried at the funeral, not because she didn't mourn him, but because the tears had dried long before. Years of loneliness, of silence, of waking up beside a man who saw her more as property than partner had drained her. And then there was Mark Landon. His name tasted like shame and honey. He had been Thomas's closest friend, a deputy with strong hands and gentle eyes. When her marriage began to unravel, Mark had been there, first as comfort, then as something more. It had been brief, hidden, desperate. She thought it had ended, until the baby came. She told everyone it was Thomas's, and Thomas, too proud to count, had believed her, or pretended to. But Evelyn had known the truth since the first signs of life stirred inside her. Now, that truth grew daily beneath her skin, waiting for the moment it would no longer be deniable. In the morning, Martha brought eggs and cornbread. She said little, only that Caleb had gone to town and would return by noon. Evelyn thanked her quietly. Sadie clung to her side like a shadow. Later, they ventured outside. Evelyn wandered the edge of the fence, watching cattle graze and listening to the wind hum through the prairie grass. For the first time in weeks, there was no yelling, no threats, no leering stays. Just space. Caleb returned near midday, his horse slick with sweat, his coat dusted with red clay. He nodded at Sadie, who peeked from behind Evelyn's skirt. "She likes the swing," Evelyn offered, pointing to the oak tree where Sadie had been laughing moments ago. "Let her use it," he replied simply. Then, after a pause, "You plan to stay quiet forever?" Evelyn stiffened. "What do you want me to say?" "Whatever it is you're holding in." She swallowed. "You don't know me. I know you've been surviving." He dismounted. "But surviving ain't living." He walked past her, heading toward the barn. Evelyn stayed after him, confused. Was this pity, curiosity, some slow-burning strategy? She didn't know, and the uncertainty frightened her more than cruelty ever had. That night, after Sadie fell asleep, Evelyn stepped outside. The moon was full, casting pale light across the yard. Caleb stood near the fence, a bottle in hand, watching the stars like they owed him something. "I lied," Evelyn said, voice barely above a whisper. He turned, but said nothing. "The baby, it isn't Thomas's." Caleb's expression didn't change. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. "I figured," he said after a long pause. Evelyn blinked. "How?" "People don't look that sad unless the guilt's still fresh." A lump formed in her throat. "So what now?" Caleb stepped closer, his voice low. "Now you sleep. And tomorrow, you get up and decide if you want to keep running or stop." He left her standing there beneath the stars, when tugging at her nightdress, heart pounding in her chest. She realized then that she hadn't just entered a stranger's home. She had stepped into a man's silence who saw straight through her and hadn't turned away. The betrayal beneath the stars. The days at Thorn Hollow passed in measured rhythm. Quiet, simple, almost kind. Evelyn found herself falling into routine she hadn't known she missed. Folding linens that smelled of wind and wood smoke, watching Sadie run through tall grass without fear, rising to the sound of birds instead of drunken shouts. And Caleb Thorne, stillness made flesh, remained both near and distant. He never pried, never imposed. But he watched, with every shared meal, every wordless gesture, pulling a stool closer, placing a shawl on the porch rail when the wind turned. Evelyn felt him circling some fragile trust neither dared to name. She began to believe this strange life might hold. Until Deputy Mark Landon rode into Thorn Hollow. The sound of his horse jolted Evelyn from the porch's swing where she rocked Sadie to sleep. Dust curled behind him as he approached, hat tilted low, posture too confident for the weight he should have carried. He dismounted and nodded toward her belly. "You look well, Evie." She flinched. That name belonged to another life, one whispered in shadowed corners, not under the clear-eyed sun. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I came to see how you were holding up. You vanished. No word." "I was sold," she hissed. "Like a mule." His gaze flicked toward the house. "To Caleb Thorne, of all people." "Don't judge. You left me with nothing but your silence." Mark stepped closer, voice low. "I didn't think you'd keep it." She recoiled, eyes narrowing. "And you thought I'd what? Hide it? Pretend the baby wasn't yours forever? I thought you'd be smarter than this." He paused. "You still have a choice. Leave with me. We'll go north. Start over." Evelyn shook her head slowly, the ground shifting beneath her. "There's nothing north but more lies." Mark's jaw tightened. "You're still married in the eyes of the town, even if Thomas is in the ground. You think Thorne's going to stand by you once he learns the truth?" Her voice cracked. "He already knows." "Gee." The EA gunshot. Mark turned, about to speak, when a shadow moved near the barn. Caleb stepped out from behind the doorway, his expression unreadable. How long had he been there? Long enough. Evelyn's heart stopped. "Looks like I arrived at the tail end of something," Caleb said, voice as dry as the earth beneath them. Mark stiffened. "Just a friendly visit." Caleb ignored him, looking only at Evelyn. "You didn't tell me he was the father." Her voice caught. "I meant to." "But you didn't." Silence stretched between them, long and heavy. Mark cleared his throat. She was alone, confused. "I didn't." Caleb's eyes turned on him. Cold, quiet, dangerous. "You're not the one I'm talking to." Mark backed up a step. Evelyn moved forward, her voice trembling. "I was scared, Caleb, of what it meant, of what you'd think. You gave me peace and I didn't want to lose it." He exhaled slowly, as though holding back a tide of anger or grief. "You should have said something the night you told me the baby wasn't Thomas's." She reached for him. "I was going to. I swear." He stepped back. "You lied by omission. That's still a lie." The wound in his voice cut deeper than any raised fist or cruel word ever had. It wasn't rage. It was disappointment. That made it worse. Mark spoke again, trying to reclaim ground. "She doesn't belong here, Thorne. This ranch isn't a salvation. It's a cage." Caleb glanced at him, then turned to Evelyn. "Do you want to go with him?" She stared at Mark, his empty promises, his cowardice, and then at Caleb, who had given her space to breathe and made no claim on her body, only offered her safety. "No," she said, steady this time. "I don't." Mark scoffed, as if the whole exchange was beneath him. "You'll regret this." "No," Caleb said softly, "you will." Mark hesitated, then mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Evelyn stood frozen. Caleb watched the horizon, jaw clenched, hands at his sides. "Caleb," she whispered. He didn't look at her. "Go inside." Her throat tightened. "Please, let me explain. There's nothing else to say." His voice was quiet, final. She felt the weight of it, like a door closing. Inside the cabin, Sadie was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed. Evelyn pulled her into her arms, heart hammering. That night, Caleb didn't come in. She watched the moon rise alone from the window, her hands wrapped around her belly, her mind looping every missed chance, every silenced truth. Outside, somewhere in the vast dark, Caleb Thorne sat beneath the stars, a bottle untouched beside him. The woman he'd bought had lied. And yet, for the first time in years, he didn't feel anger. He felt lost. Redemption rides at dawn. The wind shifted before the morning sun crested the hills, carrying with it the scent of ash and something fouler, fear. Evelyn stood at the edge of the porch, arms wrapped around her middle, watching the horizon as Thorn Hollow slowly awoke. The barn doors creaked open in the distance, chickens clucked nervously, and Martha moved wordlessly between stove and pantry inside the cabin. But Caleb Thorne was nowhere to be found. He hadn't returned to the house since the confrontation. 2 days of silence. 2 nights of loneliness stretched thin by worry. Evelyn had tried knocking once, but the door to his quarters had remained shut, his boots untouched outside. Something inside him had closed off, and she didn't know how to reach it. She hadn't come to love him. Not yet. But the ache in her chest told her she could have. If life had been kinder, if she had been braver. Sadie stepped onto the porch in her bare feet, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is he still mad? Evelyn crouched beside her, brushing dust from her toes. I don't know, sweet pea. I liked it when he made pancakes. Evelyn smiled faintly. Me too. A cloud of dust stared in the distance. Another rider. Her breath caught. It wasn't Mark. His posture wasn't arrogant enough. But whoever it was rode fast and hard. Within minutes, the figure pulled up at the gate, breathless, wild-eyed. One of the town's stable boys. You need to come, he gasped. Sheriff Duggan says it's urgent. Evelyn's heart dropped. What happened? Deputy Landon, his stirring up the town, claiming Thorne's harboring a thief and a liar. Says you tricked him and fled justice. Evelyn's blood ran cold. He wouldn't dare. He's already got half the saloon riled up. Said he's bringing a few men this way before dusk. Martha stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Sounds like a lynching party dressed in law's clothes. Evelyn turned to the boy. Where's Caleb? He rode into town at first light. Said he had unfinished business. Panic fled. Evelyn handed Sadie to Martha, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Stay inside. Keep her safe. Martha nodded, eyes narrowing. Don't do anything foolish. But Evelyn was already moving. Dustwood boiled with tension. Men gathered in front of the saloon, rifles slung over shoulders, voices sharp with suspicion and liquor. At the center stood Mark Landon, freshly shaven, badge glinting in the sun, and beside him, Caleb Thorne, arms bound, coat dusted in blood. Evelyn froze. Caleb knelt beside the town's trough, face bruised, one lip split. His hat lay discarded in the dirt. He looked up, eyes locking with hers, not pleading, not broken, but resolved. Mark turned, smug. Well, look who found her way back. You did this, she snapped, storming forward. You beat him. Mark's smile was thin. He resisted arrest, and I'm well within my right to bring charges. Harboring a fugitive, impeding justice. She's no fugitive, Caleb rasped. And you're no justice. Mark struck him across the face. Evelyn screamed. The sheriff stepped forward, torn. This is getting out of hand, Mark. Mark ignored him. She's carrying a bastard. She's lied to every man in this town. You think she deserves protection? Evelyn's voice trembled, but it rang out clear. No, I think I deserve truth. And for once, I'll speak it. The crowd quieted. I betrayed my vows. I slept with Mark while still married. I thought love could bloom from desperation, but it didn't. It was a mistake, one I've paid for every day since. But Caleb Thorne gave me shelter, not shame. He didn't touch me, didn't own me. He gave me what none of you ever did, dignity. Murmurs stirred. She knelt beside Caleb, cupping his face. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd see me the way he does. Caleb met her gaze, battered but unbroken. I don't. A silence fell, heavy as thunderclouds. Then a voice from the crowd, let the man go. Another, he paid his dues. Leave them be. The sheriff stepped between Mark and the others. Enough. This ends here. Let Thorne up. Mark hesitated, but the tide had turned. He spat at the ground and stormed off. Hands untied Caleb's wrists. Evelyn helped him to his feet, tears burning her eyes. "Why did you go into town?" she whispered. He leaned into her ear. "To end it, one way or another." She pressed her forehead to his. "You fool." "I know." Back at Thorn Hollow, the sun dipped behind the hills as evening settled in. Martha brought stew and whiskey. Sadie crawled into Caleb's lap as if he'd never left. Later, under the stars, Evelyn stood beside him on the porch. "I want to stay," she said. "You already have." She reached for his hand. "You didn't just buy us that day. You saved us." He looked out over the land, then down at her belly. "You ready to stop surviving?" She nodded. "I'm ready to live." He kissed her, slow and certain, and when the wind stirred again, it carried not fear, but promise.